Shabbat Shalom. This week's Torah portion is Emor. Emor means to say. And we're going to talk a little bit about a certain type of words that are used. And I'll just ask you a question about them. I want to ask you about cursing. When do we curse? When do we curse? Who can share? When do we curse? When we're frustrated, thank you. We curse, yes. When else do we curse? If we were playing Family Feud, that would have been like the number one answer. Very good. Yes, frustration. When we're angry, yes. We're angry. And those of you who know me know that I define frustration as when things don't work out the way we want them to, and anger is when we see something as being unjust or unfair. And either of those moments, curse. Okay, good. What else? When else do we curse? When we lack control, you said? Yeah? Okay. Sure. When we're injured, when we're hurting, when we're filled with pain. Yeah, Neil, yeah. Thank you. It's like every once in a while I'll have a Yom Kippur, I'll finish, I'll be like, I am so good, and I'm like starting the year clean, and then I stub my toe, and oh wow, like all the sins that I got rid of just came right flooding back. Anyone else? When else do we curse? Oh, Diane, you're full of when we're scared. When we're scared, yeah. Anybody else? So today in this week's Torah portion, when the section we're going to read, you're probably going to ask the question, well, what does this have to do with speaking? In a Torah portion that says Emor, what am I missing here? Because we're going to learn about how the priests dressed and the laws that govern them. But we don't really get into, I think, the essence of this Parsha until the very end. Chapter 24, verses 10 to 14. And I encourage you, if you have the red book in front of you, to open up to page 732. Because it's a story about cursing. And don't worry, there's no four-letter words mentioned. Well, maybe God's name, but that's a little bit different. All right, so page 732 if you want to follow along. There came out among the Israelites one whose mother was Israelite and whose father was Egyptian. And a fight broke out in the camp between the half-Israelite and a certain Israelite. The son of the Israelite woman pronounced the name in blasphemy, and he was brought to Moses, said God's name in a curseful manner. And therefore the son was brought to Moses. Now his mother's name was Shlomit, the daughter of Dibri of the tribe of Dan. And he was placed in custody until the decision of the Lord should be made clear to them. What's going to happen with this person who cursed? Verse 13. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, take the blasphemer outside the camp, and let all who were within hearing lay their hands upon his head, and let the whole community stone him. Yikes. So, I want you to think about what's going on here. You have someone whose mother was an Israelite, father was an Egyptian. He gets into a dispute. He recites a curse. And by the way, what is the particular type of curse he does? The rabbis teach that he calls God's name in vain. So it sort of says, I don't believe in God. And you can read into that even more, that it's not just this idea of, I don't believe in God, but the idea of what God is, I reject. The idea that God created the world in an orderly manner, and there's order, and there's beauty in this world, the person says, none of that is true. And this raises alarm for Moses and the community, and there is a really gruesome punishment. The rabbis look at this and ask the following question. And they ask from verse 10, the story begins with the word vayetze, and he goes out. And they ask this question, where did he go out from? And they give a number of answers that I want to share with you that helps us understand how the rabbis make sense of these verses. The first one is, where did he go out from? He went out from this world. And what do they mean there? What they mean is they are referencing a verse that comes from the book of Samuel. Who is doing the cursing at that moment? The one who's doing the cursing is none other than Goliath. And if you recall, it wasn't Goliath's size that was really the problem in the story of David and Goliath. It was that he was cursing the people of Israel and making them look small. Now, we understand the story between David and Goliath. Well, David was brave, he was youthful, he used his slingshot, and he destroys Goliath. The rabbis have a different take on it. And their understanding was, Goliath, while he was standing and cursing, he was leaving this world with the curses that he was saying. He was making himself internally weaker. The profound insight there is that the destructive power of the curse is not so much that they are wounding their target, but it effectively hollows out the cursor themselves. Answer number one with how the rabbis understand this text. The cursor is the one who hallows themselves. And just think about those moments when we have let out a curse. By the way, one thing that wasn't shared was sometimes we want to express our frustration at someone else. We want someone to feel our pain, and therefore we want to cause them pain through the words that we will say upon them. And here the rabbis say, well, when you do that, be wary of the giant Goliath, who weakened himself through the words that he said. Rabbis give us another answer. Here they look more at the context of when this section comes about. If you turn backwards, you will see what was just taught on page 731, but the section of the showbread. Now, if you're thinking about showbread, what is a showbread? They would be put out on Shabbat. The modern chalot are a replication of that. They're part of a sacrificial offering. And you're probably thinking to yourself, why does God need bread? And that perhaps is what this person, according to the rabbis, was thinking. This seems like an insignificant ritual. Why would anyone waste their time baking silly bread? Because God really doesn't care about those things. He is minimizing, for the rabbis, he is minimizing a small Jewish ritual. And what the rabbis feel was happening was slowly, after beginning with one small ritual that he was undermining, one after the other, it led him to a place where ultimately he was saying the whole thing doesn't make sense. And for the rabbis are trying to teach us, be careful of the things we sort of minimize. We use sarcasm on, because it can lead to a never-ending pathway where everything becomes devoid of value. And at that moment, we become like the blasphemer and the person who sees no meaning in the world can then be a destructive part of the community. Answer number 3 the rabbis give, because I'm sure you're all wondering, wait a second, are they going to do anything with the fact that there was an Israelite woman and an Egyptian man? Where did that come from? And the rabbis say, there is a clear answer on this, a story that I'm sure everyone knows about. In the text in Exodus, when we first learn about Moses, one story that I'm sure we are often familiar with is when Moses becomes who he is one of the stories that's in the text itself is he sees an Egyptian taskmaster afflicting an Israelite slave. And Moses stops and kills the Egyptian taskmaster. Rabbis say, there's a story behind that. And the story is this. There was an Egyptian taskmaster who fell in love with the beautiful Shlomit bat Divri and tried to figure out a way to remove her husband so that he could pursue her. And he does. Sends this laborer to very hard work, has a moment, and as the rabbis teach, forces himself on her, and she has a child. This is the child that she has. Shlomit is the mother. The father is not only Egyptian, but not at all present. So you have a single mother who is raising her child. And we have a problem, because in this time for the Jewish people, the way that you inherited your land and your tribe was through your father. So this person is saying, hey, according to the rabbis, I want to be a part of the tribe of Dan. And that's what starts the fight. He said, hey, give me land. And they say no, and they're fighting over land, and a curse is raised. And it's a tragic end. Because for this child who doesn't grow up with his father, doesn't have a place to anchor himself, doesn't have land or a tribe of which to belong, he expresses a curse, and he ends up being punished severely for it. And I think here, the rabbis are saying, be careful of how we judge other people, because before we label someone for being a blasphemer or a curser, we might want to understand the greater context, and we might then want to reflect on not just who the curser is, but who we are as a community, extend that out, who we are as a society that would cause someone to reach this moment where they would express such a curse. And this is where the rabbi's midrash ends. And where does that leave us? With a very interesting juxtaposition of the text and the rabbi's commentary on it. The text is sadly very clear. When you curse, there is a punishment. And yeah, I believe that to be true, especially in Judaism. We are responsible for the words that we say. Words do cause harm in the Jewish religion. But the Midrash adds another level. It says just because that is true, and there are laws that we should follow to protect us from that, it shouldn't limit us from engaging in acts of empathy to understand what was going on when someone committed that verbal crime. And very often, in our day and age, thousands of years later, we are very quick to judge untrue things, curses, or canceling. And there's a reason for all three of those things. But what the rabbis are warning us about is don't let the conversation end there. Don't close off your heart from what you are seeing, because in that case, you are limiting, first of all, your emotions and empathy, but perhaps most importantly, we are missing a learning opportunity, an opportunity for us to grow, evolve, and become a better society. When we think about this child who doesn't have a father and is searching for a place of belonging, our work now that the rabbi set up for us is how do we build a community where that type of curse is no longer said because that child found a place to connect and to belong. With that, I encourage us to think about how we can learn from the Torah portion and use our words accordingly. Shabbat Shalom.